Hey, well, welcome to Homemade TV. My name's Chris Gosling, and this is our regular Friday show at 11 a.m. in the morning. We've got a couple of people watching live, and I hope we'll have more later. We've got young Sean, who's over there in his allotment shed. Do I believe that, or is he still sitting in the luxury of his armchair? I'm not too sure. But if you're a keen gardener, I'll give Sean a little mention now because he is an excellent gardening program maker who makes online video about gardens called Sean's Allotment Garden. Sean, that's a wave to you, mate. So there we go. What have we got on the old geezer's diary this Friday? Well, we've got some interesting stories. We've got a rather nice story for people who are keen on cruising, and we've got really, I'm going to start with a distressing story. I have to say, I'm not at all enthused on this. I'll just say hello to young Mike Harvey Murray, who's there with his dogs watching the show. Good morning, Mike. The story I want to hit you with to start with is, as I say, a sad one, and it's come out locally, really, but it reflects on the kind of problems that we can get into, especially at this point where people are actually feeling alone and lonely. Okay, now, in my own hometown of Felixstowe, a few days ago, I read a little note online from somebody who said about a little old lady going into a bank and saying, I need £7,000 in cash, please, at my account. And the very nice bank teller clerk in the TSB locally said, well, what do you need it for? Do you need it in cash? Can't I do it with a check? It's more secure and stuff like that. And they had a little chat. And in the end, it turned out that two chaps had turned up, knocked on her door and said, you've got a hole in your roof, lady. We can fix it. We'll do it right now. It needs to be done before it rains. And what happened? Well, the lady believed them. And she probably couldn't go outside and have a decent look at the roof. Who knows what the story is from that point of view? But what actually happened was that the guys then took her to the bank and said, you nip in there, get the £7,000 that we need to repair the roof, and it'll all be fine. We'll get it all fixed. You'll be lovely. And she went to get the £7,000. Fortunately, the bank decided that they didn't want to really do that for her. They held on to her a little bit and they called the police. And when the police turned up, the people who had taken her to the bank weren't there, of course. No surprise there. But that lady could have lost £7,000 out of her bank account, probably had her roof fiddled about with in some way, or maybe not. And who knows what the story might have been. But it shows the kind of frauds that go on, especially when people get to a certain age. The police say only accept help from people you know and trust. Never deal with unexpected cold callers. You don't have to agree to anything that you don't feel comfortable with. Check the person calling at your door has valid identification, even if they're dressed in uniforms. Banks will never ask you for your personal security details, and don't trust anyone asking for money transfers or phone or cash over the phone. I think that's that's really good advice. But I would add one thing to it. If you are, like me, an old person, and you get people knocking at your doors, why don't you just say, oh, well, just give me a minute and I'll phone up my son, stroke daughter, so neighbour, and they'll come and have a word with you about it, because I don't do that kind of thing much myself. That's a worthwhile, if you like, other way out of that thing. And I'm very keen to see that people don't get into more trouble, I suppose that's say, than they have to be. And what can you say to that one? I think that's a really sad story, isn't it? And I think that's awful. So there you go. So that's I'm just having to fiddle with my other computer. So that's that side of that story. Do be very aware that there are lots of people out there who like the idea of stitching up old folks like you and me. There you go. Okay, what's next on the menu? Well, the next one on the menu is interesting because we do want to talk to people who are coming up to retirement, and this is a scary story. The wonderful Scottish Widows Insurance Company, who deal a lot with pensions and so on, have said to us, or have said to the world, in fact, that a lot of people will be struggling to retire in the future. They've said this, that, for instance, 27% of people traveling in, let me start that sentence again. 27% of people working in travel and the arts haven't yet started saving into a pension. That's awful. 67% of retail workers are worried that if they ever did retire, they'd quickly run out of money. Two-thirds of construction workers are in the same kind of boat, and less than a fifth of restaurant workers are optimistic about their retirement. My goodness me. It's something that's really worrying, this one, isn't it? You have to say that yeah, I think that's true, Sean. You have to say that the bank were aware in the case of that little old lady and they were properly trained. But going back to the retirement thing, so many people are not prepared for their retirement. It's something we have to look at, and I don't know where to go with this one because honestly, I think we have to look at how people are handling retirement and maybe go back to having a more comprehensive and, let's say the word, more compulsory way of actually getting people to save for retirement. Now, I was in the normal state system, but if I just had that money, I don't know, I probably wouldn't survive for very long before needing some more. I did have a small private pension, which was jolly useful, I have to tell you. But the reality is that state pension is, not really worth the paper it's written on. I'm going to continue with state pensions because one of the things that's really been getting to me, and I think to a lot of people over the last few weeks, is this story. And these in front of you, you see the members of the BBC board. What have they got to do with anything? And what have they got to do with retired people? Well, the reality, of course, is that the BBC is just talking about withdrawing free licenses to over 75s in the UK. Apparently, about 3/5 of over 75s would have to pay if the BBC withdrew this concession. And that decision will be made by the BBC board. So I thought I'd show you a photograph of the BBC board who'll make that decision. And I have to tell you that from my point of view as an old geezer, those people on the BBC board look pretty well wealthy, pretty well privileged. There's no one there who actually represents me. And if they're going to decide to withdraw £157 a year's benefit effectively from me, then I'm not going to be happy. And I'll tell you the whys and wherefores. One thing that these people don't really have is that they don't live in the real world as you and I do. And the reality for a lot of pensioners, especially come the winter time, is you see little old ladies, little old men who have been about a long time, they've worked damn hard during their lives. And what happens? Well, they come to the end of their working lives, they retire, it's all fine and dandy, and down the line they discover how skint they are. And I think there are people out there, in fact, I know there are people out there who during the winter sometimes have to work out whether they can afford to pay their heating bill or whether they can afford to have some food. It's scary how poor some people are, especially people on basic state pensions. So I'm going to just wave this little flag and say, members of the BBC board, whatever you do, take a good turn on yourselves and think about people who are not like you. You're all fairly well off, you're all pretty well privileged. The reality is that out there, getting free TV licenses at the moment worth £3 a week are a lot of old people to whom that £3 a week is quite a difficult topic to talk about. In the winter, especially when heating bills go up, when you need to eat as well, what can you say? People like you and me are out there and people like you and me are suffering because we have to make the choice between whether we're going to keep warm or whether we're going to eat something. I think that's scary. I think the BBC have an interesting moment coming up, because let's face the reality, nobody wants to pay TV licenses. I don't. Do you? Okay, so that's not the mighty BBC on the head. BBC board, take a turn on yourselves and actually look after old people and make an example to the rest of the country. Okay, well, now I know that amongst us wrinkly older people, there are a lot of cruise fans. So I've got a fascinating little clip for you. There are going to be next year, I hope, around 9 cruises running from Harwich in Essex and Glasgow in Scotland. There are going to be 9 cruises available on this fantastic sailing ship. So I thought I'd just show you it because it's brilliant. If you're a keen cruise fan looking for a new and unusual cruise from a UK port, New Line Tradewind Voyages is offering 9 UK-based cruises starting in May 2021. There will be 7 cruises starting from Harwich and 2 starting from Glasgow aboard their new square-rigged sailing ship Golden Horizon, which carries just 272 passengers. After her UK debut, the ship will be heading off to Bali, where it will sail itineraries featuring Indonesia, Australia, Japan and Alaska. You can discover more from the website linked at the end of this clip. That looks really nice, doesn't it? I love it. I'd love to have a go on it. I can't imagine how much a cruise on that ship would cost. It only takes 200 and whatever it is, 70 passengers. That's not many. And the reality is, it's got to be a wonderful idea. I think Mike Harvey Murray, Mike, you would be there, wouldn't you? On that, I think you'd be sailing and steering. Because I'd want to go. Okay, so there you have it. That's that really interesting cruise line starting operations next year. And I think a lot of other cruise lines will be, and we'll try and bring you any news we get about cruise lines starting operation. We all know that lots of holiday venues in the UK are opening up this coming weekend. And come next week, I hope we'll bring you some details on what's been happening in the holiday industry. If you get any stories, if you have any experiences while you're on holidays or while you're taking a trip on the newly unlocked lockdown holiday sites and hotels, etc., let us know. I'll be fascinated to hear what you have to say. I'd be interested especially to hear what's happening at the lower end where there isn't so much money to spend. Okay, what have I got for you next? Well, I've got a couple more interesting things. The first thing, there we go, that I wanted to talk about was this, which is join us for a Zoom WAG. I wonder what the hell that means, but actually it's Age UK doing something interesting in Suffolk. Age UK I've got a lot of time for because they try and do stuff for older people. And one of the things that they started in Suffolk before the lockdown started was something called a chinwag, where they actually had get-togethers. And I'm going to come back to that in a moment. I've got another couple of comments. They started something, Suffolk Age UK started something that I thought was a brilliant idea. They started a thing called a chinwag. Excuse me. They started chinwags in different areas, and they actually had, village halls and so on, and people could get together and have a natter. And that, for a lot of old people, is something that we don't do very often, because it's often the case that people live in, if you like, what can you say, in quite isolated kind of surroundings. And getting together and having a chat with other people is what makes the world go round. So Age UK Suffolk started doing that, and now to try and make a change, they've actually started it with Zoom, the online service Zoom. You can join into that, and that will be up on the 17th, I think, of July. I think you can get a lot more information on this one by going to Age UK Suffolk's own page online. I will include a link to that in the I was going to say in the newsletter, to be honest with you, but we're not starting to run the newsletter until next week. So I'll include it as a link, and I'll do it any way I can. I think I'll try and do it on the YouTube link page for this video, and I'll see how I can get on with it on Facebook, because I think it's a really worthwhile. We'll see what we can do with the Zoom way and see if we can publicize it a bit more. The upcoming one is on, I think, the 17th of July. Yes, it is Friday, the 17th of July, and it'll be open between 2 and 3 p.m., open to anyone between or upwards of age 65. I think that's a fantastic thing, and well done to Age UK Suffolk for coming out with the Zoom way. We will try, actually, before then, to get our Tame Tech nerd, David Jennings, to talk about Zoom. So if you're watching this show on Facebook or on YouTube, we'll show you some stuff about Zoom next week in amongst the program. So we'll get David Jennings to come back and have a chat with us about Zoom and how you use it and get the best advantage from it. There you go. I hope that's worthwhile. Okay, I'm going back to the comments now for a while, because I've discovered something that was really interesting. Young Mike says he's actually crossed the Atlantic on a square rigger in 2000, and he's looking forward to seeing that ship coming into the estuary here at Harwich, near where we live, and I am too. I'm going to go out there and film it. Oh no, he said, but we'll do our best with that one, but I think that will look fantastic next year. I'm also planning to get young Mike onto the show at some point in the future. And if I can, I'll also get Sean to come on the show, because he is a superb gardener. And I think that you would enjoy meeting Sean, because I like him and he's fun to talk to. And he does interesting stuff. So we'll try and get Sean from Sean's Allotment Garden along. And in fact, I'll include a link to Sean's Allotment Garden somewhere around the place, so that you can have a look at what he does. Okay, where am I going next? My goodness, I'm going to play a new little, I don't know what you call it really, a device that we've just come up with, which is a bit of fun. Have a look at this.
You're watching Homemade TV, fresh streamed online content for older people who want to know more about the news that affects us, the news that's mostly ignored by the mainstream media. Homemade TV.
Homemade TV, that's us, and I hope you like that, because I've decided to do a couple of little, I suppose you'd call them idents, really, a couple of little idents like that for when I lose my thread, because it's one of those things that happens, isn't it? Okay, so we are now more or less at the end of our show, and I've got one more thing I think to remind you of. I'm just checking my list as we go along. Yeah. Okay, as of next week, I hope I'm going to be able to start our newsletter next week. We'll give you details next Wednesday of how it's going to work. It is a way of getting more links to you, because at the moment, as you know, we're mainly on Facebook. We're also on YouTube, but we're mainly on Facebook. And on Facebook, you can't really show so many links. So we'll try and work this one out, so we get all of that stuff in the newsletter to you, and we'll start to build a little circulation of newsletter subscribers. If you'd like to join, make sure you keep up with the program next week. That's Wednesday, the 8th of July. Goodness, it's flashing past. But I think we have actually now covered every last bit of the program that I wanted to cover. We're coming up to around a 20-minute show, I hope you've had an interesting time. Hope you've found it enjoyable. One last thing to mention. Coming up in the next little clip, the ending clip of our show, we have a list of ways you can contact us, but you can also contact us. This is also on this. You can also contact us by text message or voice message. If you call us on 07943 043 948, you can leave a voice message or you can text us on that number, and we'll use whatever you say in the next program and make you part of it. Okay, I'm Chris. This is Homemade TV. This is our show for Friday, the 3rd of July, 2020, and I will see you soon.